And we say Sitaram and welcome back to the program Conversations. I'm your host, Vishala Ganesh. If you're just joining us, welcome. Happy Friday. Yes, you've made it to the end of another week, and we are very glad to be in your company this morning. So joining me on set now, we jump straight into our first conversation. We have two very special guests with us. They are representatives from the Human Rights Law Clinic attached to the Hugh Law School. Two students in their final year of study. I just found that out. They are Casiana Sankar and Miss Rachel Weeks, and they're here to talk to us about the Human Rights Law Clinic and one of the topics they're researching, sexual harassment in the workplace. Big topic. Let's say Sitaram, and good morning to Casiana and Rachel. Hello guys, welcome to the set.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Of course. So the Human Rights Law Clinic, I have to admit, it's the first time I heard about the clinic when Jason reached out to us at Conversations. Let's start with you, Rachel. Tell us about the Human Rights Law Clinic.
The Human Rights Law Clinic is a specialized clinic that's open to year 2 students of the Hugh Law School. So there's an application process that we all had to go through, whereby we would express our interest in the area of human rights and why we want to advocate in this area. So after the process, 12 students were selected to do it this term. So at the moment, we're in the final stages of completing the clinic. So as part of the clinic, we do a lot of advocacy publicly, not just within the arena of the Hugh Law School. So the mandate of the clinic is more public advocacy and educating the public on human rights issues and different, whatever area we decide to focus on for the particular term, and the different subject areas that we will be doing.
And speaking of subject areas, now there were 3 very big topics, right? The first one, human rights and mental health. The second one, sexual harassment in the workplace. Third, bullying and discrimination of LGBT youth.
Yes.
And your specific focus is actual sexual harassment in the workplace. So let's bring Casiana into the conversation. Sexual harassment and the workplace. What have you found in your studies so far?
Well, so far what we found is that there's no actual legislation related to sexual harassment in the workplace. So the reason that we chose these particular topics were because of a lack of law in relation to these issues. And we particularly found that the fact that there's no legislation on sexual harassment really called for us to, provide a united front and work towards bringing legislation into action.
Now you mentioned there was no legislation. Is it because you've noticed that there is an increase in sexual harassment in the workplace? You would have heard about stories in our media, of course, global media, the Me Too campaign, etc.
Yes.
What has been your experience thus far?
Well, I think that sexual harassment has been around since time immemorial, but I mean, in recent time, people have become more open about expressing, what has happened to them, their experiences with it, and I think that's why now it's a good time to bring legislation into action to really address this issue, this really prevalent issue.
So Rachel, what is the point of all this? Is it that the students are now going to assist in drafting proposed legislation?
No, it's not that. As I mentioned, the mandate of the clinic is advocacy and raising awareness. So it is our hope that through the project that we're doing, that we would raise public awareness on the need for legislation and also educate the public on the draft policies that have been put in place, because although there's no legislation in place, there have actually been guidelines that have been put forward by the Equal Opportunities Commission, as well as a draft policy put forward by the Ministry of Labour. So it is our hopes that by educating the public on these documents that have already been put forward, that there would be a greater push towards having them come into force as legislation to be actually recognized as a means by which people could seek redress.
Yes.
Okay, Casiana, talk about those draft policies, because many of us would not be aware, sexual harassment taking place in the workplace. I know both men and women are affected. It's not just one gender, but we aren't aware of draft policies in place. So maybe you can educate us on that front.
Well, the Equal Opportunities Commission, their guidelines, it's quite a lengthy document. It's about 60 to 70 pages. So that in itself is a lot for the general member of the public to go and take it upon themselves to read. So that's actually something we are focusing on right now in breaking that down into a more digestible format, probably by using diagrams and tables and stuff to kind of make it more digestible. So where a member of the public could get access to that document and really understand what the Equal Opportunities Commission is trying to, I guess, push in their guidelines. As it relates to the Ministry of Labour policy, that is more in terms of what the legislation would want to reflect when it comes into force, or if it comes into force. And so that is more in the form of what legislation would look like.
Yeah.
All right, and if we can just define for our audience, we're talking about a very heavy topic this morning. What is sexual harassment?
Okay. If I were to give a concise definition, it would be any unwanted and uninvited behavior of a sexual nature that would
make someone feel uncomfortable or embarrassed. Yeah.
Have you interviewed people or spoken to people at all who are, I want to say the word victims, but just for lack of a better term, have you spoken to victims or people who consider themselves victims of sexual harassment in the workplace?
Yes, actually. So, that will bring us to our project itself. So, as part of our project, we will be putting forward, the project is a booklet where we will be putting forward different perspectives of sexual harassment as a social issue, as a legal issue, and also presenting it in creative format. So one of the things that we decided to do for the booklet was to do an interview with a person who has been sexually harassed, who would have to remain anonymous for obvious reasons, but to, I guess, make it more of a real issue, to bring out what had actually happened, and what was their
experience,
what the experience was. Yeah. So we have interviewed someone, and it will be put forward in the booklet that we'll be presenting later this month.
Later this month, okay. So that's coming down to the end of November.
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
and this is specifically your project.
Yes.
Yes, because as we would have mentioned, there are 3 groups, and we call them the substantive project, because the clinic would have done other work before we get to this substantive project. This project is the end of the Human Rights Law Clinic, because it runs for 1 term every academic year. So at the end of the law clinic is when we will be presenting. Each group will have to present a topic on the LGBT group, the mental health group, and our project as the sexual harassment group is the booklet on sexual harassment, where we will be addressing sexual harassment, as she said, through different media, different types of, well, not different media exactly, but different types of writing.
Okay, understood. And now, I had asked you to define sexual harassment. Sexual harassment in the workplace, like what are the cues, what are the warning signs? Can you educate us from that point?
From that point, you mean in terms of what are the cues for noticing sexual harassment?
For noticing, because some people don't even know what it looks like. They think like maybe touching is normal. Someone would just put their hand on your back, and because they're telling you, well, hey, good morning, I hope you're having a great day, but not really understanding personal boundaries within the workplace. So it's different for, I guess, outside of the workplace, but generally in the workplace, people may not be aware of boundaries.
Yes.
So, as you said, touching is, once it makes you feel uncomfortable and it feels sexual in nature, that is definitely a cue. But there are also a lot of other things. It could be as simple as sending suggestive pictures or making suggestive
remarks,
jokes to a person. A big one that we came across was persons in places of authority who would request sexual favors from maybe their more inferior counterparts or people who are lower down in the management system.
That's called quid pro quo sexual harassment, in the sense of where you try to, I guess, get something in return for something. So
maybe a promotion or some more job benefits. They would request some kind of sexual favor, some kind of sexual gratification of some kind, in order to reward them, quote unquote, reward them.
That is a very serious form of sexual harassment. But as you know, there's a very low threshold. So it depends. It's on a range, on a scale, and you could say that probably from 0 to 10, and 10 would probably be the one where the actual sexual favor would occur. Yes.
So I have to ask you, as students, we have draft policy, we cleared that up, but there's no concrete legislation in place. As students researching this topic, how did it make you feel knowing that there's absolutely no law, no legislation in place to address sexual harassment in the workplace?
Well,
Casiana, take that one.
it was definitely a shock, and we actually had to address this with a popular group that we are working with for our project, Working Women. They as well were shocked when one of their members, was shocked when we actually said, yes, there's no legislation. But if we go further, we can say that it's not such a surprise. We don't have a legislation for a lot of other human rights issues as well. So,
well, as the other topics are mental health,
yes,
and of course discrimination against LGBT youth
yes,
as well. But it's not taken away from the sexual harassment in the workplace, and noting that, you know, a person was absolutely shocked to know we don't have legislation. So was I, because, you know, we have laws for so many other things in Trinidad and Tobago. I was absolutely surprised that there's no concrete legislation in place, and therefore victims of sexual assaults in the workplace or sexual assaults, they would have no form of redress.
Okay.
well,
So you could
Clarify.
You could clarify. So there's no standalone legislation. So there's no particular act that you could look at as a sexual harassment act that would specifically define it as an offense, and that would define the penalties for it. But there are other avenues which people would be able to go through. So for example, the Equal Opportunities Act, it allows for the EOC, which is the Commission, to treat sexual harassment as a form of sexual discrimination. So because of that, the EOC will be able to treat with sexual harassment issues because of their mandate to treat with sexual discrimination issues. And also,
I saw you mentioned sexual assault. Yes, so sexual assault would require, it's a criminal offense.
Yes.
And it requires a physical act. So we would have just mentioned that sometimes in the sexual harassment would not only relate to a physical act, it could be, as we said, words, or sending pictures or stuff like that. So it would not be captured under the criminal act, because it does not include any kind of physical conduct. So that's why there's a difference between sexual assault and sexual harassment, because sexual harassment is a lower threshold.
Right, and so now I guess bringing awareness to the public, and as well people who are in charge of drafting legislation, bringing awareness to them. I think that's actually more important. So they take it to the parliament and debate, and then pass legislation, and then put it into law. I think it's so important because there is definitely this gap. As I said, a lot of human rights issues being overlooked in our legislation in Trinidad and Tobago. And do you think this actually hinders our journey towards a developed country status? Like, is it something that hinders us? That okay, so we are aware and we access so much technology these days, and you know we drive nice cars, we have the latest technology, but then in terms of our law, we're not exactly that far along.
Yes, that's quite true. And once we have vulnerable groups that are not legislated for, those people will always be, I guess, the ones who would not be able to move forward as smoothly and as quickly as others would. So we wouldn't be able to become a completely developed nation if we have such a large sector of people who continuously would be unprotected by the laws. So any developed nation needs to make adequate protection for the human rights of every person in the country. So once we have that gap, that's very true that it would hinder us in attaining fully developed nation status.
Definitely. All right. So we have Casiana, Sankar, and Rachel Weiss with us on set from the Human Rights Law Clinic of the Hugh Law School. And I actually know you have a video to show us, right? And tell us about the video before we go into it.
So this video captures our school presentations that we would have done earlier on in the term between October and mid-November. And these school presentations would have really helped us to understand advocacy as a student attorney. We went to various schools throughout the country, in the south, some in the very far
Manzanilla.
east, Manzanilla.
Right.
We went into Port of Spain, and we even did some within Tunapuna and Kirep. And so,
And how was the response like? Yes.
wow, it was amazing. We did 4 primary schools and 4 secondary schools. And so the age groups of the primary schools, obviously, they were around 12 years old, 11 to 12 years old. And the Form 6s would have been about 17 to 18 years old. So it was a very different presentation we would have done for the younger ones to the older ones, because we wanted to obviously get across the message of human rights and to make sure that they would understand it at their level.
Exactly.
And the primary school children were so adorable. They were so innocent, and you could really see that they wanted to try to change the world. The older ones were, as well as we were, very shocked at the lack of legislation as well, and they also understood the need to assist our brothers and sisters in the world and really promote human rights.
Okay, great. So let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll see if we can actually get the video up and running.
Yes.
All right. So do we have it? Actually, we do. Okay. So Director Vivek is telling me we have it. It's a go, Vishala. So let's take in the school tour, and then we'll get back to our conversation and wrap up this interview. Take a look.
Change the world. Yes.
So you're empowering young people, and you're empowering citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, we are.
So, and I say hats off to you and your entire team at the Human Rights Law Clinic at Hugh Law School. I know we are quickly running out of time. So, Rachel, your final comments on this issue, sexual harassment in the workplace, your project, final year, Hugh Law School. Tell us about it.
My final comments on the project specifically would be that we are aiming to present sexual harassment in the most publicly digestible format that we could think of. So we're aiming to take out all of the legalese, you know, those high-sounding technical terms that would be used, and present it in a way that would be
easier,
digestible to the average person, so that we could understand it as an issue, and also understand the ways in which it's lacking. So the booklet itself that we'll be putting forward is aiming to do that and to present it in also a visually attractive format. And sexual harassment in general, is our hope that through our advocacy and our constantly bringing it up as an issue, that it will be put more on the forefront of our legislative agenda, and we'll be able to get some legislation very soon.
Thank you, Rachel. Casiana, wrapping up.
I agree with everything Rachel just said. Also, you all will be able to access this on our media platforms via Facebook. So don't forget to follow us on Hugh Law School Human Rights Law Clinic, and you will be able to get this in a PDF format so that the public can get it and really understand sexual harassment and how it works. There will also be creative pieces in there, so those who like poetry, creative writing, those types of things, you can always count on us.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Casiana and Rachel, for joining me on the program Conversations today.